Okay, for this unit, we talk about the triangles. And first, from this triangle, that's what you have been learning from like geometry. When we have a triangles, if for these angles, this side we call it opposite of this angle. And this longest side will be hypotenuse. And the side next to this angle, we call it adjacent side of this angle. And based on this right triangles, we have a formula to find all the 6 trig functions. The first one, sine always be opposite over hypotenuse, and the cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Tangent will be opposite over adjacent. And another 3, we call these 3 are basic functions. The other 3 actually you can just get from these 3. First, cosecant. Cosecant will be reciprocal of the sine. So actually this will be 1 over sine. And if it's a reciprocal of the sine, when you flip, this is a formula. That's why we have a hypotenuse over opposite. And the secant is reciprocal of the cosine. And that's why when you do reciprocal, we have a hypotenuse on the top, adjacent on the bottom. And for the cotangent, cotangent will be reciprocal of the tangent. Okay. And that's a 6 formulas you have to memorize to able to find what's all trig functions if the angle is a given. And for example, for this question, example 1, okay, if we are given a point, P is 3 and 4. First one, if I want to make right triangles, that's x-axis, that's y-axis. And we plug in this point to this coordinate system. So x is 3 and y is 4. And that would be the point P is. And now we connect this point P with origin. And we call this is a terminal side of this angle. And start from the P, we draw a vertical line to x-axis. And that will be opposite side of this angle theta. And then for this one, we will call that is adjacent side of this angle theta. And based on this right triangle, by using the formula, sine will be opposite over hypotenuse. And this terminal side, we will call it hypotenuse. And will be opposite is, that's a y value actually. So that will be equal to 4. And that's x value, so which equal to 3. So we have opposite over hypotenuse. And we don't know the hypotenuse yet. That's why we have to use the Pythagorean theorem. So the opposite side square plus the adjacent side square always equal to this hypotenuse square. Okay, let's do x and y. So x squared plus y squared always equal to r squared. That's a Pythagorean theorem. So if we're looking for this hypotenuse, that would be the r. And we're given x value, which is 3. And the given y value, which is 4, and then which is r squared. So we have 9 plus 16 equal to r squared. And when we're solving for r, you just need to take square root of this number. And the square root of 25 is positive 5. So that's how we know the hypotenuse is 5. And that's how we find the value of the sine. And we do same thing for cosine. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So adjacent of this angle will be the one next to it, so it will be 3. Hypotenuse is 5, and that's it. And the tangent of this angle will be opposite over adjacent. And the opposite side of this angle will be 4. Adjacent side of this angle will be 3. And that's how we find this 3. When you get this 3, you're actually able to get the other 3. reciprocal of the sign is a cosecant. So you just flip these two numbers to get 5 over 4. And the secant of this just be 5 over 3. And the cotangent of this will be 3 over 4. That's the first way to solve this problem. The second way is, look at the front page again. We learned this from Unit 1, and we call this is a point P. The question always gave to you. When we connect these 2 points, the point P and the origin, we call this side will be the hypotenuse, or we call this is the terminal side of this angle theta. And in general, we're using R to represent. This number represent the distance between this point and this point P. If it's a distance, that means this side always be positive number. The R always be positive. And this vertical line will be Y value. Adjacent side will be X. And those two values are given from the point. Okay. So look at the next page. Let's do example for this one. So for the part B, if we're not using the first way I showed you for part A, you also can do this way. For this way, you don't have to draw a triangle because that's a X, that's a Y. And if you're doing this way, you have to memorize this formula by using X, Y, R. That's a formula you have to use. Okay, so back to this problem again. For this one, we know X is 15 and the Y is 8. So you can solve for R by using Pythagorean theorem, which will be 15 squared plus 8 squared. And then use your calculator. Let's see. You will get 17. And when we know these 3 values, then you're able to just plug in. Sine is Y over R, so it will be 8 over 17. Cosine is X over R, so which will be 15 over 17. And the tangent is Y over X, so by plugging the formula, which will be 8 over 15. And when you know these 3, you can just find the other 3. Cosecant will be reciprocal of the sine, so that will be 17 over 8. Secant will be reciprocal of the cosine, that will be 17 over 15. And the cotangent will be reciprocal of that, that will be 15 over 8. That's how you find the 6 trig values by using the points. Okay, that's 2 different ways. You can use triangles and by plugging the opposite adjacent side and the hypotenuse side to get the answer. Or you can just by using this coordinate point X, Y, and to find your answer. Either one, answer will be same. So that's why you have to memorize these 12 formulas for both of them. One is for hypotenuse, adjacent side, and the opposite side. One is for X, Y, R. That's how we do those problems. And for the quadrant angle part, for this part, okay, that's a coordinate system. And we know this is the x-axis. So we know on this side, x going to be positive. And on this side, the y value will be positive. And on this side, the y value will be negative. And this part, the x value will be negative. Okay, so if we have any point on this interval, on here, any point on here, that means x value need to be positive, y value need to be positive, and by using those formulas, you can see if they all are positive, that's why all trig functions have to be positive. So you know as long as the angle from a quadrant 1, the trig going to be positive. And for the second quadrant, if we have a point from here, we should know x value is a negative, y value is a positive. Based on the formula, sine is y over r, cosine is x over r, and the tangent is y over x. Based on these three formulas, when x value is a negative, that means the cosine need to be negative, and the tangent need to be negative. Sine is the only one has a positive here. That's why I'm using S to represent on this quadrant. The sine going to be positive. Okay. If a sine is a positive, actually we know cosecant also will be positive because cosecant just the reciprocal of the sine. And for the third quadrant, if the angle from here, that means x is a negative, y is a negative. So for all the trig, as long as have x and y on there, we should have a negative. So that will be negative value. That will be negative value. This will be positive because negative number divided by negative number will have a positive. That's why on the quadrant 3, the tangent actually will be positive. And we're doing the same thing, the fourth quadrant, the cosine actually will be positive. That's how to tell you which quadrant, which trig are positive. Okay, that's why we do A, S, T, C. A means first quadrant, all trig positive. S means sine be positive on the second quadrant. T means tangent will be positive on the third quadrant. C means cosine will be positive on the fourth quadrant. That's how you can memorize this. And then look at next page, how we apply this question. Okay, for the example 3, I'm going to redo this one for you. So, part A. First one, sine equal to 12 over 13. And we know the formula for the sine is y over r. And based on a fraction equal to the fraction, that means the numerator going to be equal to the numerator. So that's how we know y will be 12. And the denominator have to be equal to denominator. So we know r equal to 13. Okay. And when we know y and r by using Pythagorean theorem, x squared plus y squared equal to r squared. So we solve for x. X will be positive, negative square root of r squared minus y squared. And why we have a plus minus here? Because look at the quadrant we did earlier. Here. We don't know what that point came from yet. That's why the x could be positive, could be negative. That's why we keep positive, negative first before you start to solve the equations. Okay, now let's start to solve it. We plug in r is 13, y is 12. And then use your calculator, we will have positive, negative 5 here. Okay, that's the first step. Using the trig function to find all the three sides. And the second step, you should by look at the quadrant of this angle. And this question, the angle in quadrant 1. That means the angle will become from here. And when angle from here, the x value will be positive number. That's why you can just get x equal to positive 5 instead of plus minus. So when we know these three sides, we can find the cosine and the tangent. So cosine is x over r. So you just plug in 5 over 13. That's it. And the tangent equal to y over x. So y value is 12, x value is 5. And that's it. That's how you do for part A. And then look at part B. If cosine equal to 2 over 3, and the window formula for the cosine is x over r. That means 3 is r, And the 2 is x. And we're solving for y. Will be plus minus square root of r squared minus x squared. By plugging number, will be 3 squared minus 2 squared, which is 5 inside. And the 5 is not perfect square, so just keep your square root. That's always be the first step. Second step, decide the angle. For this problem, the angle data in quadrant 4. Okay, so in the quadrant 4, x will be positive, y will be negative. Okay, that's why the y value will be negative radical 5, not plus minus anymore. Will be negative square root of 5. And by know y, r, x, now we're able to find the sign now. It's y over r, and the y is a negative radical 5 over 3. And the tangent is y over x. So the y value will be negative radical 5, x value will be 2, and that's it. That's how I do this problem. Okay. And for the part C has a little bit different. First, tangent is equal to y over x. And from this problem, which equal to 3. When you don't have a fractions, we need to rewrite this number to fraction. So that means when we rewrite this to fraction, that will be 3 over 1. Or, if they both are negative, so negative 3 over negative 1 also give me 3. That's why at this point, we don't know they are positive or negative yet. That's why I keep plus, minus for both of them. Okay, so that means x equal to plus or minus 1. Y equal to plus or minus 3. How we decide they are positive or negative? Same thing, depend on the quadrant. So this question is the angle in quadrant 3. So on the quadrant 3, you can see x is negative, y is negative. So that means we just do negative 1 for x, negative 3 for y. There's no plus or minus anymore. And now we can solve for r by using these two numbers, which will be square root of negative 1 squared plus negative 3 squared. And the r is a distance, so r always be positive. And when you plug in these two calculators, be careful. You have to close parentheses. You have to put a negative sign inside of the parentheses. Then calculator will give you a correct answer. Because negative 1 squared will be positive 1. Negative 3 squared will be positive 9. And then when you simplify, that will be radical 10. And this also is not perfect square, so just leave there. We know x is this, y is this, r is this. Then we can find cosine theta. It's x over r. So x is negative 1. R is radical 10. And we don't want the square root on the bottom. So when we simplify this one, we multiply by this radical 10 on the bottom and the top. Radical 10 times radical 10 would be radical 100. That would be 10, no radical anymore. And top would be negative radical 10. So that would be the answer without the square root on the bottom. And for the cosecant is r over y. So you just put r on the top, y on the bottom, and that's it. That will be answer. And for D, cosecant is a 6 over 5. And we know formula for cosecant is r over y. So that means phi equal to y. And r equal to 6. And then we're solving for x, which is square root of r squared minus y squared. And then we should have a plus and minus. R is 6 and 5, which will give me 11. And now let's decide answer be positive or negative. So look at this problem. We are not given anything about the angle. We don't know where the angle. So if we don't know where the angle, that means the x value can be positive, also can be negative. We don't know. They both are positive. That's why we keep the plus or minus for this problem. And now we're solving cosine. So cosine is x over r, and x is plus or minus radical 11. Just keep the r is a 6. And the cotangent is x over y. So it'll be plus or minus radical 11 over 5. And that's it. That's how we do this one. I'll show you one more example for this type of the problem. Okay. If we are given cosecant equal to -4, if that's what we are given. And now we know this angle is in quadrant third. Okay. And then we're solving for cosine and the cotangent. Okay. So first, cosecant is equal to r over y value. And we have a integer. So we rewrite this number to fraction. And when we divide by 1, we don't know this negative sign goes to 4 or goes to 1, because -4 over 1 is -4. And the 4 over -1 also equal to -4. So kind of like we don't know where the negative sign should be at this point. But look at the top. The top is r. R is distance. And we said earlier r always be positive. So we kind of like know the top number have to be positive. If this number is a positive, that means the y value on the bottom have to be negative. Okay. And now let's find the x. X is plus or minus square root of r squared minus y squared. Use a parenthesis. And then 4 squared is 16 minus -1 squared is 1. So we will have a radical 15, plus or minus radical 15. And now let's decide. We know this is in the quadrant 3. So on the quadrant 3, x value, y value both are negative. That means this x should be negative radical 15, not plus or minus anymore. After we know these 3 numbers, then you can find the answer. Cosine will be x over r. So it will be negative radical 15 over 4. And the cotangent is x over y. So it will be negative radical 15 over -1. And the negative cancel, so answer just be positive 15. That's how we do this type of the question. Okay, that's on the page 3. And for the page 4. Example 4. We are looking for in what quadrants make these two things happen. Okay, so we're based on this quadrant again. There's 2 ways. First way, sine is positive. So look at this ASTC. Sine is positive will be on first one and the second one. So first one and the second one, because these 2 quadrants sine are positive. And the cosine is a negative. ASTC, cosine is a positive here. That means it will be negative to be here. the quadrant will satisfy both of this will be second quadrant. That's how you know answer is second quadrant. Okay. The second way is, look at this one again. Sine is y over r, and we know is positive number. So that means both of them need to be positive. So we know y value is positive. And the cosine is equal to x over r, which is negative. And then we know the r always be positive. So this fraction be negative, that means x value have to be negative. Okay, on this coordinate system, we're looking for the quadrant. When x is a negative, y is a positive. So that will be right here. That's also how you know this angle should be on the quadrant 2. That's two ways. It doesn't matter which way. So let's do one more. Part B. Secant is r over x, and which is less than 0. That means x going to be negative because r is positive all the time. And the cotangent is x over y, also negative. We already know x is a negative. So that means y value have to be positive to make this fraction negative. So look at the quadrant. X is a negative, y is a positive, also on this quadrant. That's why answer for part B also quadrant 2. Okay. How about C? For C, cosecant is r over y, and which is negative. And we know r is a positive for sure. That means y value need to be negative. And the cosine is x over r, which means positive. So bottom is a positive. That means the numerator have to be positive. And then look at those quadrants. Which point make the x be positive, x be positive, and the y be negative. So x positive, y negative. That's why the answer should be from quadrant 4. That's why answer for this C is quadrant 4. And the last one, D. Which trig function are, all trig functions are negative? That's not possible. All trig are positive here. Sine are positive here. Tangent is positive here. Cosine is positive here. There's no quadrant make all trig be negative. That's the answer would be not possible. Okay, that's how we do this one. Yeah, I think that's what these are. And then for the unit circle, I can make another video on next time because that's a unit to test 1 stop at. And this part will be calculated aloud. After this point, and for the unit circle, there will be no calculator. Okay, I will make another video for this one later on. And then make sure you know how to do this unit to test 1. And if you have any question, let me know. And then try to do your homework and the Excel. Hope this video help. And just be careful, the quadrant does matter. Make sure you need to know what's a quadrant, which quadrant this angle is in, because that will determine your x value, determine your y values are positive or negative. That also will affect your final answer when you're solving the trig. Okay, that's it for this one.